Welcome to the webinar, Sociocracy and Permaculture, Designing the Future. This webinar is being presented to you by Sociocracy for All. And I'm Jerry Koch-Gonzalez. I'm here with Jennifer Rao. We are the principals of Sociocracy for All. We'll explain more about what Sociocracy is, what Sociocracy for All is, and then get into the content of the presentation that our panelists here will tell us about. And after the presentation, we'll have the question and answer period. At the very end, we'd actually love to hear if anybody else, who else out there in this world has their feet in both worlds of sociocracy and permaculture design. That's our plan for the session. And I think we're ready to just go into a brief introduction about Sociocracy for All.
So SOFA is technically a nonprofit. This is SOFA. When we call it SOFA, what we mean is Sociocracy for All. The idea of Sociocracy for All is to spread content, and one way of doing that is to produce video. And we have a few videos about Sociocracy up. Here's a little overview of it. I'm sure by the time you watch the recording, there's going to be even more. For instance, this one is going to be one of our videos. Our most watched video, if you would like to learn more about sociocracy, if you are coming here with from the angle of permaculture, this is the video that is sort of the short introductory video to sociocracy. Also the one that we recommend sharing. Then what we do besides video is we offer resources. Our goal is to make sociocracy accessible to as many people as possible. Our website, Facebook, Twitter are our main channels right now. Then what we offer is a study group curriculum. If you're inspired and you have a group that you would like to be learning with, you can look on our website. We have a study group curriculum that groups can use to study together. We also do immersion training, and we will talk about that a little bit at the end, because one group within our immersion training has been focusing on permaculture and sociocracy in the past 9 weeks. And we are a membership organization, so we have people that are supporting us in the background and that we work with, and they work together in several circles, doing several things. So I'm going to talk for another 5 minutes or so about what is sociocracy. And the basic concept we like saying is no one ignored. How can we build an organization where nobody can be ignored? And all the processes that we use are supporting that principle of no one ignored. So if we drill a little deeper, what is that? How can we do that? And the 3 values that it is focusing on is transparency, effectiveness, and equivalence in service of the organization's aim. So we have to have clarity on our aim and what we're trying to accomplish together. And those values, transparency, effectiveness, and equivalence, show in everything we do. And I will explain that on some examples. And all those values then guide how we work together. Sociocracy focuses on 3 areas of governance and how those areas interact. And the first one is organizational structure. So we organize ourselves in small groups that we call circles. Here you have an example of that. Those are the people in one of those circles who do the work in one area or one area of responsibility in one domain. And they make the decisions about how they go about that work, how they govern themselves in doing that work. And circles are nested. So as soon as you have a more specific domain or you put some more attention to a subfield of those, you can start adding more circles and nest them into each other. And you can drive that to any level of complexity, going into sub circles if you want. The important thing is to remember to drive the decision-making power, the authority, into the most specific circle. So don't make a decision if a group that's closer to the actual work, like further in a, like deeper down in a subcircle, could make that decision for themselves. So we want to have a sense of the whole, and that's why there is a general circle that is here shown in the middle. That doesn't make the decisions for everybody, but that is there for flow of information between the circles so that we don't have silos. And there is also another way of connecting people and circles that I will show in a sec. So how do we get transparency in that kind of structure? And one is clarity about who does what. That already helps a lot when we understand where in the organization am I a part of and who does all those other pieces, how does that go together? And another piece is that we try to keep information as accessible as possible to everybody. So minutes are being shared, meeting minutes, and all information that there is within the organization. How do we get effectiveness? Remember, we was talking about transparency, effectiveness, and equivalence. So how do we get effectiveness? Well, the people who are closest to the decision, closest to the actual work, make decisions. That makes the line very short. They are experts on their own work, and if they guide how they do their own work, that's going to end up being very effective and efficient. And how do we get equivalence? Well, everybody's basically taking care of their own piece of the whole thing. There are no top-down decisions, so that way people can really be in choice about how they do things. There is another little piece, and that is what we call double linking. I hope you can see my cursor. I think you can. Yeah, so those purple little people, they are connecting this circle and that circle, but everywhere where two circles are connected, you will have double linking. So those two purple people are both full members of this circle and also full members of that circle. There's lag time that's confusing. So that one circle cannot make decisions and like force decisions onto the other circle. There are two people who will be at both those meetings, and they will be able to be there for flow of information, so they both know about each other, what they're doing, and nobody can be outnumbered, outvoted, or anything like that in sociocracy. The other big thing is how we make decisions, and we call that by consent. Consent is defined by nobody has an objection. That means a decision is made when nobody objects, which means nobody thinks that the ability to do the work within that circle is going to be affected by a decision. That also means that we're not trying to make everybody happy or to please everybody. We're just trying to make a decision that nobody's disagreeing with. And that is, I try to indicate that with a one thumb that is not perfectly up, that person isn't happy because like, fine, I can work with this. So how does that support transparency? Well, we know what we're deciding and what others are thinking because we're sharing that. We're not just voting, and the people who vote no, we never get to hear what they were actually thinking. How does it make things more effective? As well, we don't argue over details. We wait till somebody actually objects, and then we know what to pay attention to. We will try to resolve that objection, so it helps us focus on what is actually something that needs work. And the equivalence part is important here. Nobody can be ignored. You will be heard if you have an objection. There's no way a decision can be made ignoring an objection of yours in the circle. The third piece is continuous learning, and that will sound very familiar to people who are familiar with permaculture. So for everything we do, we make a plan, we carry it out, we evaluate what happened, and aim for something better next time. Rinse, repeat. And so we use feedback processes on everything, on workflow, on policy, on meeting evaluations, on people in roles. Wherever we can, we try to be in the habit of evaluating what we do. So again, how does that support transparency? Well, we use data to see what's going on wherever we can, and we share openly how things work for us. So you would be very open and honest in a meeting evaluation so that the same group doesn't run into the same issues again and again, just because nobody dares to speak up or because there's no room where those people could speak up. How does having feedback increase effectiveness? Well, it's because we strive to get better at what we do all the time. And how does it support equivalence? Well, it's because, again, we're open and transparent, and that means we have a way of addressing power dynamics that we see. And if you have data that supports your point of view that is independent of assumptions that might be implicit, so you have a way of proving your point, and that will be listened to.
Okay. So we in Sociocracy for All noticed that a variety of permaculture design teachers and professional associations around the world have been adopting sociocratic practices. And that inspired us to become more intentional about exploring and deepening the connection between the worlds of sociocracy and permaculture design. To begin that journey, we invited our colleagues, John Schinnerer and Aaron Young, John from Western United States and Aaron from Eastern Australia. The questions that we put to them were, what is the synergy between the essential principles and practices of each? Why is sociocracy a good fit for permaculture design? What can permaculture design offer sociocracy? So John and Aaron will present for about half an hour, and then we will open the webinar to questions from our listeners. Use your Q&A function. You can start at any time writing questions there. We won't be answering them until after they finish their presentation. So at the end of the formal time of the webinar, when we have sort of closed the webinar, we will also then stay informally for anybody who wants to chat for a while live. And that's it. John and Aaron, take it away. Introduce yourselves as you will, and you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Jerry and Jennifer. Appreciate your introduction. So I can I'll give a very quick spiel on who I am. My name is Aaron Young. I'm based on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland in East Coast Australia. I've been involved with Sociocracy since 2012, so about 5 years now. I learned with John Schinnerer and Gina Price here in Australia, and I came to it very much as a practice of permaculture for people. So this topic is very dear to my heart, and it's been with me the whole way through my Sociocracy practice. John, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself before we jump in?
Yeah, sure. So my name is John Schinnerer, and relevant to this webinar, I'll just say I learned through finding permaculture and similar things that I'm a generalist in a specialist culture. That was a big help in figuring out what to do with my passions in my life. I was studying ecological design, including permaculture, did a master's degree called Whole Systems Design at Antioch University in Seattle. And my focus came to move more and more towards human systems as underlying, what we do with ecological systems, or even how we understand them or fail to understand them. I stumbled over Sociocracy first right around the end of the 1900s, late 1999 or early 2000, and then waited some years for, sort of English resources to become available. And so 2007, John Buck and Sharon Beline published their book, and I began studying, ultimately working with John Buck and others, including Jerry, one of our SOFA co-hosts, and founding the Sociocracy Consulting Group. And I think that's good enough for now.
Great. Okay, so I'll get the slideshow up, and I'm going to be exploring how that works with the screen share. Okay, great. So I'm not sure if you can see the Zoom window as well. Is that the case, or is that just for me? I think it might just be for me. So hopefully you can see that all okay. Let's dive in.
Excuse me, is there a way of doing it full screen? Because we do see a frame around it, and I'm not even sure we see a whole window. So if there's a full screen option.
So I was choosing the non-full screen option so I could still see John as well speaking, but I'm okay to fly blind. John, just give me verbal prompts as we go through.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So as Jerry mentioned, what is the synergy between the essential principles and practices of both sociocracy and permaculture? So going into that, both of them at their essence are whole systems design practices. So they're both design approaches, and they're both working with methodologies of thinking about how we do things and designing how we do things more so. And inside of that, they're both methodologies that are based on living systems. So in the center of the screen, you can see the Permaculture egg logo, which is all encompassing of what permaculture is about. You see feedback loops inside of that. You see the above and below, and the inside and the outside. Essentially, when I look at this, I see a sociocracy map as well, but that's a far more intangible way to describe it. On the right side of the screen, you see the life cycle of a butterfly. It goes from the larva, it hatches out, and it flies. And I really see sociocracy providing that option for us humans in our organizations, that we are allowed to crystallize an idea in a proposal. It can hatch out and it flies, and then the life cycle will continue again. We'll review it and we'll keep going. So as we look deeper into that, the connection between both of them is that they work with the whole and component parts. So as you see here, it's a picture of an eyeball, and it's the component parts of that. The lens, the pupil, the iris, the cornea, they all know exactly what their role is within the function of being an eyeball. The retina doesn't tell the iris what to do, and the pupil does not tell the blood vessels what to do. They each are there in their full autonomy to do what they have to do to be an eyeball. If one of them has a dysfunction, then other parts of that eyeball will need to step in and take the weight if that's possible. So we see that being set up in sociocratic systems for humans. We each know our place, we're clear in our role, and we're able to function in that in our full autonomy. And inside of that, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's a pretty common principle in life, and yet again, we see it in sociocracy just as much as we see it in permaculture. And very much as Jennifer mentioned in the opening intro to what sociocracy is, we can use that idea of nested circles. And in permaculture language, that's going from patterns to details. Sociocracy is based on circle structure, circle being a really key pattern we see quite often in nature, and we see it used in permaculture in various ways. In sociocracy, the circle holds topic-specific details within the self-organizing groups. Just in the same way that in a permaculture garden, on a very simple level, we would see the garden beds holding the structure of that bed, say it's a raised bed, or the polyculture growing within it, that polyculture being the details of the garden, and the structure of the garden bed holds it very succinctly into what it is. As Jennifer also mentioned, we have feedback loops in both sociocracy and permaculture. So living systems rely on information being communicated and moved around. In this water cycle we see here on the screen, the evaporation process sends signals to the rest of the system of how much moisture there is in the air. The whole macroclimate will be affected by that. It will get the positive feedback or negative feedback, and will naturally balance to find the equilibrium between whatever the feedback is giving it. In permaculture, we would see that with crop yield, for example. If our polyculture is fully thriving and we're getting huge abundance from the garden, we will get the feedback, receive the feedback that the processes we're using are working positively for that system. And of course, you can go into the finer details of that feedback loop. There might be leaf color that gives feedback that the plant needs a particular type of nutrition. There might be certain bugs that is feedback that there needs to be other plants to help to work together to help pest control. In Sociocracy, we see feedback coming through, particularly through the consent decision-making process, where we use rounds for input from each circle member. So that's where it is really speaking to. No one is ignored because everyone has a place to offer their feedback in their full integrity as a member of that circle. Anything that is given to the circle is the full ownership of the whole circle. It is not just that one member's information or feedback. It's now everyone's because we're part of one whole. So the details are coming out to contribute to the whole. Okay, John.
Okay. Yeah, this is over to me. So I want to back up a little. As Erin said at the start, both sociocracy and permaculture, we consider implementations of whole systems design. So I want to briefly say, well, what the heck is whole systems design? The most general statement I've come to make is it's about how we do what we do, rather than the specific thing we do, which Erin alluded to also. So I'm just going to break it down. Whole, or holism, is the idea that when you've got a whole something, whatever it is, the parts are interdependent, and the parts really don't make sense or aren't useful or somehow don't belong anywhere without reference to what they're part of. And so some of you at least will recognize this picture of a bunch of parts on a table, and you might know instinctively what the whole is. And some of you might not, depending on your cultural background, and how old you are, or whether this is retro already. But you know, this is, so the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. This is all the pieces of a Rubik's Cube toy. And obviously by themselves, you can maybe have fun playing with them, but they don't perform the function of that puzzle game by themselves. You have to put them all together. They have to relate in a certain way. Then you can play that game. So holism is this idea that parts are interdependent and they don't necessarily work by themselves without the whole. Next, please, Erin. Erin's running the slides here. So systems is a group, a bunch of things, a bunch of pieces or parts that somehow work together to create a more complex whole. So that Rubik's Cube is one example. All those little bits of plastic make something that becomes a movable, brain-stimulating game. And here we have a picture of a bit of soil, topsoil, with which to a permaculture eye looks pretty rich and happy and exciting. There's lots of fungal mycorrhizae there, and maybe some little root hairs, and the soil looks like it could be a nice color with lots of humus in it. So again, this is a group of interdependent items, life forms in this case, and they make a whole that is much greater than the sum of the parts, because they can create and support more and more complex forms of life. And I'm using soil a lot in my piece of this because I think we don't think nearly enough about soil and the health of soil and the complexity of soil. So think about all of what might be going on in this tiny bit here. And let me go, so that's holism and systems, and then next please, Erin, and we'll look at design. So from my perspective as a generalist, as a whole systems designer, design is two fundamental things. It's creation of the not yet existing. So I found this lovely picture of somebody's fun idea of an upside down house, which at some point was the only one of its kind ever created, and I think there's probably been more created. This is a tourist attraction in Germany. So it's creating something that didn't previously exist. If we're just making more of something that already exists, that's production. That's production work. You make the prototype, it proves successful, then you make lots and lots of copies. And the other thing design is that it is other expressive. And what I mean by that is, the contrast I make is that artists are typically self-expressive. What artists produce is very often a reflection of their culture, their society, and how they see that, or how they would like others to see that. But they're moved personally to express themselves, and it reflects their larger world or their context. Designers are primarily other expressive in that they are attempting to help or support their clients in expressing what their clients are trying to put into the world through their skill with design that the clients may not have themselves. So that's the two fundamental things I want to say. So whole systems design is putting all of these together, a holistic view, a systems approach, and design process to do whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's it on that. And we have a couple of examples just to flesh this out a little bit. I'll start with one. So what we call traffic problems. Can you, oh yeah, thank you, Aaron. Traffic problems, how do we solve them? Okay, so next please. Our approach typically has been, well, we say what are the causes of traffic problems, and we tend to assume that it's a lack of transportation infrastructure. And so if the problem is not enough transportation infrastructure, then we just need more. So we build more roads, we add more lanes, we do HOV lanes, we get more buses, we build light rail, and so on and so forth. Now, as we can also observe, this doesn't work, because by the time that's built, it's usually almost at capacity as soon as it's available, or will be shortly thereafter. So a whole systems design approach looks to expand the picture and say, okay, if this isn't working, back to the feedback that's been mentioned several times, this isn't working, so maybe we got the wrong problem here. Maybe what's causing this isn't lack of transportation infrastructure. So instead, we might, next slide please, look at how we use land, our land use design, how that generates the traffic that we're trying to solve by creating more infrastructure. So when we place all of our essential daily needs of vehicles journey away from ourselves, we generate that traffic, and in most cases we cannot build our way out of it by creating infrastructure for transportation. We need to change the patterns of land use. So that's one example. Back to you, Erin, for another example.
Okay, so coming to something that's probably far more familiar to the permaculture people amongst us is the Humanure, or the composting system of our human waste, in comparison to the conventional sewage systems that we find in all around the modern world, particularly. So there's a key difference between these two systems, and the image there is taken from the Humanure handbook, which is a key commentator on this topic. And when I live in a rural area, I have a composting toilet system myself, and whenever I go to visit my parents in the city, I remember what it's like to have to flush the toilet and use drinking water to send that human waste away. And on the left side of that image, we see what is happening in that system. You know, whether we eat chemical or organically grown food is not necessarily the point, but we eat food, we discard our waste, and particularly we send that into drinking water that's been treated with a lot of energy to make it drinking water. We flush the button, and then it goes and it gets concentrated at a treatment plant where the solids and the liquids are dealt with in their appropriate way, and they're discarded. And in Australia, it gets discarded out into the ocean. To me, that seems a bit broken, as the picture says as well. It's energy intensive. It doesn't utilize the resources that we're providing, because human waste is just as useful as animal manures to use in the system to build soil. And it stresses the whole system. That output that's being put into the ocean is stressing the ocean. The ocean isn't prepared for that. When we go to the image on the right side there, the intact system, we see what is possible when we have a connected system. We grow food, we eat it, we excrete that waste, and we put it into the soil. It embodies the energy that our systems are putting out, takes the matter, converts it into soil, enriches the soil and builds the soil, regenerating that system and providing energy to the whole system that can then go and contribute to growing more food or growing other plants that own resources that contribute to how we exist as humans. So this is something that we see with humans working together in sociocratic systems. We don't work with the power over reality, which I equate more to the broken system, which is a linear hierarchical reality. We have more of a hierarchy in the appropriate way that work is organized, but the humans are enabled through the circle structure particularly to contribute what they have to share. I wouldn't call it our excrement, I would call it our feedback, what we have to enrich the system, and that can effectively be composted to regenerate and build up what we're doing together to enrich it, so that we can move forward. So the intact system here is exempling that the feedback loops that are really essential to build the system and embody the energy that's available within it, coming from each of us as members of that system. Okay, so what can permaculture design offer sociocracy? Over to you, John.
Right, thank you, Erin. So I'm just going to frame the broad piece of this, and then Erin will go into some details. But in general, it's a whole systems design approach to bringing ecological systems back into our awareness as we make decisions in our human organizations. I suspect everyone here can, think of something that they're either very happy about or very upset about, where ecological systems are being, not considered enough in human decisions. And again, I've just got shots of there's soil, there's happy mushrooms, there's happy soil, there's somebody with a handful of soil, there's someone really on the left paying attention to what is going on in the soil. So from a sociocratic perspective, it's like the voices in the circle. It's a way to re-include the voices, so to speak, of ecosystems that we depend on for our existence in our decisions. So that's the general contribution that we see. Back to you, Erin.
Okay, so how permaculture can be specifically woven into sociocratic systems is by using the ethics as the basis of what we do in our people systems. So these don't need to be permaculturally related organizations specifically. There can be any sort of group of people or organization or company that can really ground itself on the ethics of care of earth, care of people, and fair share of resources. And as I say there, that can be woven not only into the visions of the organization and the mission, but driving it down into the aims, the values, and the policies that are pulled through in a sociocratic system. And so as we see on the next slide, in the same way, the permaculture principles, working with the Holmgren principles here on this screen, they can be used as both design, evaluation, and strategy tools within any organization. So the principles there could be used, maybe not all of them at one time, but if that's appropriate as well, as a lens to look through any policy that's being put forward as a proposal. There could be rounds done on each of these principles to assess how a proposal is adhering to what is founding the organization, and acknowledging that these principles have holism built into them. They're thorough. There is more that can be included to that perhaps, and so it's beholden to the organization to feel as complete as they want to feel with what principles they use. So they can be used for picture forming to really scope out what are the possibilities, what can we observe and interact in this situation, how are we obtaining a yield in this situation, how might we use slow and small solutions, how might we integrate rather than segregate. And in the same way, the principles can be used for measurement criteria. So when we're reviewing a policy that's been in place, or we're reviewing our mission as an organization, how have we used the edges and valued the marginal? Have we valued diversity? Have we produced no waste? How have we valued renewable resources and services? So really embodying the collective wisdom and the timeless wisdom that is built into the ethics and principles of permaculture to guide how we gauge where we're at as an organization, no matter what sort of organization we are. And getting more specific with permaculture techniques that can be used in sociocratic systems, the pictures, the images on the bottom of the screen there are of sector analysis. And that's really mapping what's happening in any one situation, what energy flows are around. They will map where the sun moves, the arc of the sun through the summer, where the arc of the sun is in the winter, where the wind is coming from, where the fire might be around or accessing the site, where water is moving around the site. So in the same way, we can take that into organizations and consider what is happening around, where are the energies moving around the organizations? Who has expert information that we can utilize? What information is naturally flowing around us? What feedback loops can we observe and utilize to inform us of the situation as it is? And there could be really creative ways to map that sort of information as well, visually or in any other informational way, to really clarify where is the system at right now in this moment. And that, of course, will be dynamic and will need to be updated constantly, because that is the nature of life.
Erin?
And yes.
Yeah, one thing you had down about sectors,
Mm-hmm.
I think was missed in the notes. Erin can't see her notes, so I'm just jumping in when something
Go
else.
for it.
Was the piece about, you know, they're, you may have said this in a different way, but that they are of the larger context. In other words, they're things that sort of come at us, so to speak. So the wind does what the wind does. The sun moves where the sun moves. We don't control, you know, we don't control that. We have to learn how to work with it.
Yeah, thank you, John. Okay, and so we can move also into zones as something that can be applied from the permaculture reality into sociocracy specifically. Zones is pretty neatly tied with the idea of domain in sociocracy. So each circle group in a sociocratic system has a really specific aim, and it has a domain or a territory that it influences. In the same way as we see zones in permaculture, designating an area of similar activity or energy use. So, you know, classic permaculture, zone 1 are the day-to-day activities or the things that require our constant attention on a daily basis. In the same way, we'll have zones, circles with zones that are more day-to-day activity, day-to-day production, day-to-day decision-making. Which also affects the time scale of decision making as well. There will also be circles in sociocracy that are not so much focused on the day-to-day. They have a broader or a different level of scope that they take on what the organization is doing. They might have a more of a broader spectrum, you know, looking out further into the distance rather than working on what needs to be produced today. They'll be looking at where are the energies flowing around us, and how might that influence what we're doing in 5 years' time? How might we design ourselves to where we want to be in 5 years' time? So using the idea of zones to help us understand our domain or territory of work that we do and the timescale that we do it in. John.
Okay. Yes, back to me. Thank you. So another piece of, this is actually, there's something called Keyline Design. Percival Alfred Yeomans, P.A. Yeomans, another Australian actually, developed a really well thought out land use, soil enrichment, and water management system, predating permaculture, originally started in the 50s. And it's typically incorporated into permaculture design. Mollison and Holmgren definitely saw this as key piece. So Keyline Design, a part of Keyline Design, one of the tools it has is called the scale of permanence. I just want to point how that can also apply in sociocracy. The scale of permanence in terms of land design, Yeomans basically said, let's look at what we have a lot or a little influence over. What can we change, or how much energy and or time does it take to alter something in the landscape we want to affect? So it ties back to sectors in that it's looking at things that we may not actually have much influence over and need to work with versus things we can actually affect a lot in a short period of time. So this little graph here shows how much time it might take on the horizontal and how much energy it might take on the vertical. And these are key elements that Yeoman's Keyline Design looks at, such as climate and land shape. To change climate takes a lot of energy and a long time, as we might be seeing in recent times. And land shape, we can get big, huge machines and move around a lot of lands, but it takes a lot of energy. And the more you want to move, the more time it takes. Things such as structures and where you put your fencing and how you divide your land for different uses is relatively easy to change. Less time, less energy. And one of the brilliant pieces that Yeomans noticed is that soil, the quality of soil, is actually easily affected in a short period of time. We can see that by how rapidly we've destroyed a lot of good soil in a very short amount of time. His good news is we can actually regenerate it also in a pretty short amount of time. But the parallels here in sociocracy, for example, would be looking at this same sort of scale, but with different elements in there. What takes a lot of time and energy for us to affect, and what can we affect or change quickly with less time and energy? So for example, it's easier for us to choose who we work with and how we work together, at least in a fully sociocratic organization, if people who are not aligned on the aim of that organization are not going to fit in and won't last. And those who are will be drawn. On the other hand, things that might take more time or energy that we have less control over would be, for example, if you're a nonprofit, the nature of foundations and grant givers. They determine the rules for getting money from them. And you can look at, what is the low-hanging fruit, as we say in permaculture. Who's more likely to be aligned with us and support us versus who's going to take a lot of time and energy to convince to be aligned with us and support us. Another piece that would be on the very far end of sociocracy scale of permanence might be laws of a nation, laws of a state or province, laws of a municipality, where it might take a lot of time and effort to change those at a broad level, but we might be able to affect change much more rapidly on a smaller scale, which ties back to small and slow solutions. So that's a bit about Keyline Design, scale of permanence, and how we might apply it. Next one, please, Erin. And so another piece about permaculture that we find applicable is the whole piece of site assessment. Observation. One of my mentors says, he has a quip where what's the first 3 steps of permaculture design? Observation, observation, observation. Okay, really pay attention to what you're working with before you start messing with it. Understand it before engaging with it. So in sociocracy, we're talking about people systems, fundamentally. And my pictures here are chosen with some purpose because you're seeing a couple different people systems. The one in the middle is actually some of the Pussy Riot activism in Russia. And the one on the left, I can't quite make it out, but it's something in the United States, I believe. So we can observe these systems and we can either react, which is what often happens, or we can observe and really try and understand, as with the example of how to solve traffic problems, what is really the fundamental want or desire here? And where in the systems that we have can we most effectively change something with the least effort and the least time. So how do we design with what's happening as much as possible? You know, what's already happening, what can we change, what do we have to work with? And the last piece is this cool little kid with his shades and his little meditation pose, observing this stuff. It's really helpful in either with human systems or ecological systems to come with a child's mind, with the beginner's mind, partly because you may be more open to possibilities, and also because, you know, as we know, children will see things and just say what's happening. They won't screen themselves or be politically correct or overly tactful. They'll say something, you know, the emperor has no clothes is our archetypal fable about that. So site assessment can apply very much to sociocratic systems, to any human systems. What is the system doing now before we start messing with it? And that's it for that one. Next. And another piece here, succession. So in natural systems, here we've got a lovely picture of a big old tree that laid down and is becoming food and nutrients for many younger. There's one tree you can see very obviously. There's all kinds of other things growing out of it in the background. So in permaculture design, we seek to understand how succession works in ecosystems, how they change over time to become more diverse, more resilient. And then we look at how we can use that in our designs, or how we can accelerate it so that it happens quicker. You know, as Yeomans was finding with his Keyline Design, it takes, you know, natural systems a certain length of time to make a new inch of soil, but we may be able to cut that in half or a quarter or more. So in sociocracy, we can look at, there's the piece of succession in organizations. Who is the founder or founders? What roles are people in? And how are we designing so that those roles will be filled, you know, well and adequately as we move forward, even when those particular people lie down and become nourishment for the next generation. So it's really important in human organizations to pay attention to succession, and so the organization doesn't get crippled by not being ready for the founder leaving, or the founder getting kicked out, or a person with a lot of specific skills and knowledge leaving for whatever reason. It should run itself and not be dependent on a particular person. So that's it for that one. Next. Back to Erin.
Thanks, John. So it also helps us think about the idea of monoculture versus polyculture, both coming from a permaculture reality into how we do things in people systems. So sociocracy is very much based on the right side of that image you can see there, where there's a thriving abundance of flora and fauna. There's a diversity amongst the people that are there. You can see their features, their details. Compare it to the left side of that image where you've got linear lines. There's a real, the application of chemical fertilizers is contriving that situation very heavily. And so when we take from the permaculture reality into sociocracy, we can use that tenet of multiple elements per function, where different people may be trained to do one role. So as John just mentioned, if someone is taken out or lays down for whatever reason, is not able to perform the role, there's an embodied understanding and knowledge of what that role is about and what it does, how it is done, so that other people can step in. They'll naturally bring their own energy to that role and how they do that, but the general framework around it means that that role will continue. We can also see multiple functions per element, where one person may do many roles. So the woman there harvesting the apples may also be the person who's cooking the apples later on, and she has many things that she does in that system. And we also work with distributed leadership. So there's not one person who's calling shots on our people gardens, so to speak. The distributed leadership allows us as we're sitting there in our full autonomy as sovereign beings to feed back as we see, like the child in that image where there's no censoring what is coming out necessarily. This is what I see. This is the feedback. This is the observation I have of the system. There is an inherent leadership involved in being able to speak that observation really clearly. We take that to more distinct decision making. When we do that in consent decision making, we are embracing the feedback from multiple people. We have a diversity amongst the human input that's coming through. So we have a polyculture of observation. We have a polyculture of creativity that helps any proposal or policy be enriched by the real-time creativity and feedback loops that are happening, so that it's good enough for now and safe enough to try. So we always know what our timeframes are that we're working with. Just like in permaculture systems, we'll know, if we're working with annual crops, how long that we have until they're likely to be harvestable. We'll know how long a perennial tree is likely to be alive for, so that we can work with those parameters to help us in our leadership. Anything to add on that, John?
Nope, I think you've got it. I sent you a quick chat as we go into the third.
I'm sorry, I can't see it. So you're
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll cruise on into the last section, which is why is sociocracy a good fit for permaculture design? So this is for you permies out there who are wondering, why should I think about sociocracy as a way that we do things together? So for me, it's really important to understand those two words that make up community, which is common unity. That's what we're all doing together in our people groups. We're working together, unified with the vision that we're all working and driving towards. So sociocracy is a really elegant and succinct way of clarifying what our common unity is from the whole system, and what that common unity is as we break it into its component parts. How is that part contributing to this common whole? How is that other part contributing to this common whole? Are they all functioning fully to allow us to meet in that common unity? So more detail to that is that we have shared agreements that are co-created together that we will use to guide us in our people systems. So each circle group within a sociocratic system, so you'll see that in a permaculture system. So you have a classic permaculture education space. There'll be gardens that display how permaculture systems grow food. There'll be an education space with a classroom. There'll be a kitchen where catering is done. There'll be an office where the bookings are taken. So each of those spaces are then autonomous unto their own. The kitchen knows how to cook food. They're making the decisions about cooking food. The education space know how to train and educate people, so they're making decisions about that. The gardeners and the people working the land, they know how to do that, so they're making the decisions to do that. They're also the ones who are paying attention to the energies moving around that system. So they've got the most information to work with to make succinct decisions. So sociocracy provides us a framework that we can work most effectively and efficiently within the system, so that we can meet our common unity. We're really clear on what our vision is, what world we want to see ourselves living in, and what mission that particular permaculture education space, for example, is driving toward that vision with, and then how each of those component parts is what helps that all pull it all together. And that speaks to the idea of whole systems integrity. So there's that notion of dynamic predictability. So we know that the education space in that permaculture education center, the education classroom, we have an understanding, there's a predictability to what they're going to be doing. There's a predictability to what the kitchen will be doing, to the elements that they're working with, to the output that they're likely to give into the system. So there might be there might be unknown aspects that come into it that the kitchen have to deal with. Oh, we didn't get the onions we expected to get for the curry. So they have to make quick decisions on and know what they're going to do in that situation. But we're likely to know that there's going to be a curry coming at the end of the night to feed everyone who's been educated in that space. So it's we see this in nature as well. Living systems reliably doing what they do. The bees in the image that you can see on the screen, they know how to make honey. They know how to do that. The worker bees know what they need to do. The queen knows what she needs to do. The flower knows what it needs to do. None of those elements are necessarily overriding any of the other elements and saying, hold on, you're not doing it correctly. I'm going to tell you what to do now. They're all in their integrity as they do that. So there's agile boundaries and discipline that comes into that. I know what to expect of each other. So when that doesn't happen, the feedback loops can come in and say, hold on a second, the predictability's gone on a tangent here. What's happening with that? Is that appropriate? If it is, let's work with that. Is it not appropriate? How do we call the system back into its integrity, into its dynamic predictability? So it's not stayed and stuck, but it's not chaotic and ungraspable in that sense. It brings in accountability and responsibility to all of the elements performing their functions as the system needs it to. So in a permaculture system, this particularly, and we bring sociocracy into that, we would see it particularly in the idea of roles and responsibilities. So roles are really clear. That person is the head cook, the head chef of the kitchen. We know what we expect of them, and they know what is expected of them. So they can perform that in their full ability to do that. They can also feed back if that's not going to work well for that role. The person who's gardening knows what their role is as gardeners to produce food. They know that they need to have a certain quality of food. There's the role descriptions really give a clarity of accountability that helps people know that that's taken care of. We know what's being expected. And that's not a new concept to have role responsibilities clarified, but it's something that sociocracy really brings in the details amongst the bigger patterns of the circle structure. John.
Okay, thank you, Erin. So to wrap it up, the last piece, effective organizing. I'll be clear here that this is my opinion, but over 20 some years of observing permaculture subculture and being involved with it, my opinion is that effective organizing is not happening very much. There's bits and pieces and spots in the world where there's some amazing things happening, but in the broader picture, it's really somewhat surprising to me that a group of people who value so much the interconnectedness and synergy and collaboration of natural systems seem to be challenged to do so themselves as people in propagating permaculture. So from Sociocracy, some of the key pieces that would support that is more power with and less power over, more collaboration and cooperation, and systems that are diverse, robust, and resilient on a broader scale. I mean, that's what I would like to see. I think we could be much more effective propagating permaculture design as a system for addressing many of the issues that we're facing if we had more effective organizing as what I'll call at present a subculture of the larger culture. And in particular, cultural change through accelerated succession, meaning we talked before about succession as something that's common to both applications, succession in groups of people, succession in ecological systems. And in ecological systems, we can accelerate the growth of and diversity of systems by, making it happen faster by physical intervention often. In terms of our human systems, I'm talking about looking at what our culture is now, what we would like it to be, and rather than, just kind of watching and hoping that it gets there, we start specifically doing things to accelerate that succession. I'll specifically suggest that in permaculture tends to draw a disproportionate number of people who I might call rugged individualists, or at least individualists or pioneer species in the language of permaculture and species biology. And so pioneer species, as Brock Dolman at Occidental Arts and Ecology said in a conversation once, pioneer species can be, they're often, you know, kind of dry and harsh and prickly, and they don't get real close to each other. They don't grow real close to each other sometimes. So we need to look at how do we accelerate the succession in our human permaculture systems to move past that sort of pioneer species phase and into more diverse, robust, interconnected ecosystems for organizing to propagate permaculture. And that's
And I
I
might add in there, John, that my experience is that pioneers in social movement, particularly in social enterprise, are really critical, bringing together a new way of doing business in a way that serves the needs of the earth and people care that are around. What pioneers often need is to know that what is so dear to them, why they pioneered that movement, that social enterprise, the aspects of it are taken care of. It gets beyond their ability to do it all, but there might be a fear or a concern that it's not going to be done as well with the right care and the right vision to understand how to meet all of the elements. So what sociocracy can offer in that sense is a solid, dynamic structure that allows the pioneer to see the map of the people working together. Aha, I see the roles, I see the circles, I see the vision and mission that we're all working toward. So there's a sense of security that can come to the pioneer that allows them to move in a succession and not need to be in the power over reality, which is part of the pioneering aspect, but really allow it to evolve on to the next the more sophisticated, complex decision-making that allows that system to broaden and become more effective in that overall vision.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for hearing that.
Yeah, that's all. And we're quite a bit over on our presentation, so we'll just put up the last slide and move on to the next part. Thank you for listening to that. And back to Sherry and Jennifer, whoever's in charge next.
I am. So thank you so much. There goes the slide. I want to bounce on two things while people might be willing to write some more questions. We have 2 questions in the chat, and now is a good time to type them if you want to do that. And in the meantime, I'm gonna say what I must love most. The picture with the bees and the flowers. And what you said, Aaron, I think it was you on that slide. They know what to do and they don't override the other system, and just a sense of peace and strength that comes with that. And how absent the concept of competition is there. You know, humans are sort of trained to go into competition, where that is out of place, because we can't just have trust that the other system knows what it's doing. I completely love that. One thing that I'm taking home from my work around sociocracy is paying more attention to succession. Amazing point there. Yes, we're not, at least I am not paying enough attention to that. So that was a big, wow, yes, light bulb moment for me. Thank you a lot for that. So let's see, I'm not seeing any new questions coming in. I want to announce one thing before I focus on those questions. We are both, Aaron and John, and me for SOFA, going to tell you about next events at the end. And another thing that we're going to ask you to do is, some people have already started in the chat, just to the panelists, is we would love for you, if you have a connection of both to sociocracy and permaculture, or would love to connect it more, we would love for you to write down your interconnections into the chat, either to everybody, if that's what you choose, or just to us panelists, because we in SOFA right now are trying to map things out some more, and I'm sure Aaron and John would love to hear that as well. So questions into Q&A. That's the two different systems here. Q&A, that's where your questions go to the panelists, and chat is where your connections with permaculture and sociocracy. Now, hold on, Erin, I'm going to mute you because typing is loud. So, Q&A, there we are. We have
Jennifer,
yeah.
Are you able to capture the chat? I would hate that information. You can. Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna write myself a huge piece of paper to remind myself before I close this whole thing, because in the normal Zoom, right, it goes away. But I don't think it does for the webinar edition, but let's see. Okay. Let's see, now there's many new questions that I have to read over real quick. Let me just start on one and then I'm gonna read the others. So when we talk about integrating voices of ecosystems in human decision, what methods do you use to, in quotes, hear the voices of ecosystems? I don't know, you have to make sure amongst yourselves that you know who's answering, and Erin is still muted, so you have to unmute yourself if you want to speak. Okay, who's gonna take that? Okay.
I'll start off real quick and then give it to Erin. I'm going to speak to the general sense of that question because, you know, the culture I'm of and from anyway is so not listening, and I don't want to start saying, you know, use this technique, use that technique, get a sit spot, go take courses with John Young or Tom Brown, do the tracker. That's all very valuable stuff, and it's a way to start, I think, getting back to being indigenous and Aboriginal people indigenous who are of the place where they live. So I'm just going to say at that broad level, we need to, whatever we can do to move back to being indigenous, to really knowing our land, our landscape, and seeing ourselves as part of it. We are not in charge. We have a role and a place, and I'll leave it at that and see if Erin has anything else she wants to add.
Yeah, I think my response is around term or time frame that is associated with a decision that's made. In the same way we would understand a tree would have a certain lifespan that might be really long or it might be shorter lifespans. I think the time frames are what really help us, and have that really set when we make a policy about something. What's the review time frame around that? We know we're going to come back to that decision and we're going to review that. We're going to get feedback about that. We're going to measure it. We're going to see how effective it was or is, and we're going to make the move on from there. That's our next space of action. So the timeframes allow us to work in slow and small solutions in a way. They give us iterative steps that we can assess how the system is functioning and then what needs to happen then. So if the pioneering energy has served its course by the time that policy review is up for discussion, then we know we can put a new proposal in to bring in the next element of it. The same goes for elections that sociocracy has. There's always a term around any role that is elected for. So we're always checking in. How is this person performing that role that they've been elected for? Is it appropriate? What else might be needed to be included in that role? So we're always given a chance to evolve what's happening.
Ready for the next question?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I see a relationship between succession in nature and in organization. It makes me think about the importance of proper, timely delegation, handing the, baton? And what is it? Help me here. In the processes of organization, having a healthy flow of information, best practices, etc., avoiding that energy gets stuck or stagnant at any point. What do you think?
I was kind of talking to this one. I'm sorry, I must have glitched when I was reading what were the questions there. So my response is what I have just said about having really clear timeframes around roles and the roles that people are elected for, just as much as the aims that a circle has. Always having that space that we come back to review, is this functioning still for us to achieve our mission as an organisation?
Okay, and I just have a request for our moderators. Can you please not move the question to answered until we're both done? Because it's, I'm looking at it on the screen and then it disappears and then I have to go to the other tab. Thank you.
It helps me organize what I've already dealt with, but okay, yes, okay.
I understand. So let's see, do I have anything to add? Yeah, I don't really have anything at the moment to add. I think Aaron covered it well. Well, the key piece, I want to emphasize the preparedness and the willingness to do that succession. Like we've worked with, actually this is where I met Aaron in person at one point when Gina and I were working with an organization she used to work for in Australia. And I've encountered this with clients that even when the people involved have every conscious intent to plan for good succession, to not be stuck in the founder role and the organization, when everybody wants that, it's still difficult. So be prepared that the succession piece with human organizations, human power dynamics, and leadership is going to be maybe more challenging than you think. That's all. Thanks.
I would love to hear about this one. So I'm gonna move things around a little. Here's one. What about the idea of trust between members of a circle and between subcircles, etc.? Does this happen naturally?
I'll start and say that if people trust the process and are really willing to do the processes, the Sociocratic circle processes, and suspend whatever judgment, reactive nature might be going on, I see that does build trust, and people who cannot trust in that context will typically self-select out. So naturally, yes, but there has to be a commitment to really testing it and not just bailing out as soon as something gets a little challenging. Erin, anything to add?
I'd say what I have to share is the parallel to soil, and what you said in the webinar, John, is really apt for what people systems needs. Healthy soil has healthy culture, healthy soil culture, healthy soil life. In the same way, our organizations need really healthy culture that helps us to express ourselves, to know each other, to understand the needs of each other and how that particular person might respond well to their needs being met. So when we have a healthy culture that's holding or founding all of what we're doing together, then we can naturally have a deeper level of understanding and therefore trust. I totally agree with what John's sharing about knowing the processes and sticking to them. And I don't see that as a rigid fundamentalism either. It's about knowing the principles that we're working by and trusting that they're going to hold us, and there's a deep intelligence inside of them that when we hold to that, it will help us meet our needs. So I think having an organizational culture of connection and understanding is really critical as well to support the trust.
I'd be interested in how you both see the edges from permaculture crossover in sociocracy.
You got anything to start, Erin? I saw that. I'm pondering it myself. I'll say that it wasn't in the slideshow because it didn't jump out at us in the time we had available, but go ahead, Erin. Any thoughts?
I see the circle edges in sociocracy being really critical. You know, we have the general circle that has the double links. The double links are an edge. You know, they're members of both one circle and another circle. They are connecting information. They're bridging worlds. So that's a really like the immediate edge that jumps out at me in sociocracy and how we see that in organizational design. I guess the edge of a term of someone's role, that review time, that's an edge. It's like the end of something, or on the edge of something new. What's possible gives us an opportunity to work with that edge. If a role went on without a review time, we don't have an edge to work with. We don't have a place to wedge something in and change if we need to necessarily.
Yeah, I'll add that the formal the formal overlap with the larger world in a sociocratic organization at the broad level is what's called generically called the top circle. So the top circle, and I'm going to boldly say that permaculturalists should all stop using edge and start saying ecotone, because that's a more correct representation. It's an overlap. It's not a line. It's not a hard thing. It's an overlap where things mingle. And I think that's crucial to understanding what's been pretty much called the edge effect in most places. But a few of my more thoughtful mentors kind of insist on calling it ecotones. So I'm doing that too. So the top circle has this overlap with the larger world through those external experts. And in any organization that significantly interacts with the world, you know, a nonprofit providing services, a business providing products and commercial services, there's also the ecotones at all of those places where someone within the organization interacts with someone who's technically outside the organization. So those are, as in permaculture, those are areas of potential richness that, you know, we learn something from our clients. We learn something from the people we're serving, or hopefully we do, in the way that the complexity of an ecological ecotone informs everything that's living in that area. So yes, thank you. Good question.
Examples of bad succession processes in this way can be someone who's jealous in sharing their success factors, or too much control and micromanagement for lack of trust in the collaborators, or processes that get stuck for lack of resources, knowledge, skills, and this becomes a burden for other processes. And this is not a question, so I'm just going to ask you for your reaction.
Yeah, that covers a lot of cases. Yeah, and it ties back to trust. If someone is jealous or envious, has that got something to do with trust? If they have a need to micromanage, what do they really need? You know, what are they trying to solve for themselves by trying to control things more than is healthy? Erin, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would bring it back to common unity. You know, that idea that we're a whole with a common unity, and is that person clear of what that common unity is? Is there enough alignment with that common unity to help that common unity to exist fully? Are each of the members able to fully show up? Just as, you know, there's a lot of assumption in this, but I would say a worker bee doesn't really choose whether it has an easy day or a hard day in collecting pollen to make honey. It goes for it according to the climatic conditions that it's within. So in that way, when I look at sociocratic systems and people working in them, we're fully turning up in our role. And if what that person's withholding means that they're not fully turning up in their role, then they're not, you know, they're not a fully functioning aspect of the system. Maybe it needs to be worked into their role to share clearly and transparently. And, you know, that being one of the tenets of sociocracy is transparency. Of course, there's discernment with transparency, but transparency is really critical to the system having a full functionality. So yeah, I would say that withholding isn't aligned with either sociocracy or permaculture in that sense, within reason.
Well, I have to admit, I have a hard time understanding the questions, grouping them in a way that makes sense, and listening to you at the same time. I think I found two questions that are both sort of hinting towards accountability. So one is, how do you make sure that people in a faraway subcircle, say 3 or 4 circles away from the general circle, complete their tasks in a way that is still connected to and aligns with the bigger picture? So how are the central aims of the entire organization permeated through to the smallest circles?
Well, may I jump in, Erin?
Please.
I mean, it won't be my job. I mean, I'm kind of playing with how the question is framed. How do you make sure? And I know you mean, you know, I'm not sure who exactly you mean is supposed to make sure, but fundamentally, it's that circle's job to make sure. And then at the next broader level of organization is the first place it would turn up. You know, so if we have a chair factory and, you know, somebody's making, there's a circle making the chair seats and a circle making the chair legs and a circle making the chair backs, then if the circle making the chair legs is not getting its work done, you know, as agreed upon at the level of making the whole chair, if that circle doesn't catch it, it's going to affect the other two. It's going to affect the output of chairs, and you know, that's, somebody's going to raise that because it's affecting their job. I mean, there is an assumption that people care that they're doing their job well, and you know, if they don't, then they may be in the wrong organization or the wrong part of the organization. But it's really the structure and the double linking gives a system where if something's not getting done and the group responsible for it, you know, if someone there isn't kind of raising their hand themselves and saying, hey, we're falling behind, or we're making the thing crooked, or whatever the problem is, that it will be affecting pretty quickly through the feedback of the double links. And not just that, but also whatever the operational feedback is of the people who assemble the whole chair, saying, hey, we're not getting enough legs. We've got all these backs and seats. What's going on here? So the feedback loops are built in, and that goes all the way from the most specific to the most general work. So that's the idea, is that it's self-correcting as quickly as someone notices it and raises it to attention. Erin, you want to add anything maybe from an ecological perspective? That was kind of just sociology.
What I've got to share is from sociocracy perspective, that the aims of the circles and the subcircles are all to produce or provide something. They're all measurable, and that feedback loop is clearly seen to the circle that it's nested within, that's relying on that feedback being part of it. So that helps to really clarify what they're to be producing, and also the circle with the broader scope, that is the holding circle that the next are nested into. They are responsible for electing the operational leader of the nested circles. So there's a sense of accountability to the circles that comes through there. That operational leader is chosen and elected to be to uphold the aim, so that the system can be clear. So there were the two things that popped up for me. And I will say this from an ecological level: if our eye doesn't transmit visual information to our body, and we're about to be run down by a truck in the street, then our heart doesn't know, or our system doesn't know to pump more adrenaline and to run fast and to get out of the way of the truck. So there's a system self-destruct. That's a bit of an extreme example, but if one part of our system decides not to function, then we're weakened. And in that, we see it in our bodies. We can function to a certain level with a weakened system, but there are threshold levels. So there are fluctuations to that answer. There's ability to, that's the resilience of the system. It can hold weakness, but to what extent is, the system needs to decide for itself.
Sorry, I was muted. So there was one question that now disappeared, but I'm trying to put it up. Is there another name for top circle? That's what John mentioned, sort of on the board level, the top circle. Is there another name for it that is more evocative of ecological structures and less implicitly hierarchical? We're thinking of calling ours something like the nucleus or central nervous system. John.
Yeah, and I see Jerry put a comment, but I wanted to address this one because you used the word hierarchical. And this is one of the things we often run into in working, especially with certain types of organizations. So well, first of all, let me suggest that when I hear nucleus or central nervous system, I can easily see that as entirely as hierarchical as top circle. Language is an interesting thing, but the hierarchy in sociocracy is an organization of work, not a hierarchy of power over. I'm going to give the quick etymology of hierarchy because it's not what we think it is. If you go back to the earliest root of hierarchy, the basic definition, before it was perverted and twisted to the ends of people who wanted power over, was the orders and tasks of heavenly beings. Okay, that's, I believe, from the Greek. The orders and tasks of the heavenly beings. So if you think about what that really means, it means there's all these different types of heavenly beings back in the day, the cosmology. And they each had their different jobs to do, right? The incubus did this thing, and the succubus did that thing, and the archangels did this other thing. They weren't, as has been mentioned several times, they weren't telling each other what to do. They had their own domain, like a circle has a domain, and they had their work to do, and that's what they did. So the original hierarchy was an organizing of work into different domains. And that's the same meaning that it actually has in sociocracy. So I really, part of this cultural shift is rethinking our assumptions about words like hierarchy. Hierarchy, even the kind that some of us don't like, is very useful in certain ways. Okay, so we want to take the tools we have and use them in the ways that support what we're doing and don't degrade it. So as Jerry said, call it whatever you want, basically. Just consider the possibility that language is probably not going to be neutral. And the question is that top circle entity, whatever you call it, is it providing an interface with the larger world, the external expertise that the organization should have to know what it needs to know about the larger system that it's, within? And is it sticking to the job of the top circle, which is strictly the highest level, broadest picture, longest term guidance of the organization? That's the purpose of what's generically called the top circle, is the broadest, most general leadership. It should not be down there telling people what to do in sub-circles. It's just about tracking the long-term progress of the organization towards its aims and guiding that progress at the broadest level. Okay, thank you for letting me go off on that. I just really wanted to get that hierarchy piece in. And if Aaron wants to...
Yeah, in that way, I've heard the equivalent of the meta circle or the macro circle. So really getting that meta or macro perspective is how I've seen it before.
I like the term macro circle. That's good. I'll remember that. I'll take one more question, and sorry for everybody whose question I'm not picking here right now. And then we're going to talk about next events, and then we're going to do a formal closing, and panelists are going to stick around, and I can even pull people into the panelists so you can see each other. For now, last question. I think that has to do with producing yield, with a better soil, better production. What would be needed to produce more yield in a sociocratic organization?
Nice question. You got something off the top, Aaron? Okay, I'll start. Well, if we think about, what makes for rich soil is partly that piece about everybody knows and appreciates each other's expertise and skills. So with soil microorganisms and fungi and other critters, that's kind of just built into what they are. They don't have this abstract thinking that we have as human beings. But in terms of a human organization, I have a choice to, complain about something about a coworker, or recognize also where their value is. So I think part of it is, let me back up and say, if you read Gerard Endenberg's work, developer of contemporary Sociocratic circle method, one of the things he wanted was more harmony in the workplace. He was aiming for harmony, and I think he knew that more harmony would probably increase productivity and improve the profits and reduce employee turnover and all those kinds of things that business people talk about. But in a sociocratic organization, the good soil is built by first of all, the transparency and the feedback. People are not trying to do their job in the dark without really knowing what they need to know to do their job well. There's systems in place that either consciously or unconsciously tend to build trust among the people working together. And there's the feedback loops, which, just as in regular soil, if any, and you know, for the permies here who've gotten really into soil, you look at some of those amazing the transactions that happen between root exudates and bacteria and mycorrhizae, and you know, one does this thing and that's feedback to the other to do the next thing, which triggers the third thing, which is feedback back around to the roots. It's just amazing. So we're creating something, we're trying to create something similar to that through the structures and processes of a sociocratic organization. So that's my thoughts. Erin, over to you.
I would share that the permaculture principles are interrelated. So what helps to create more yield is to use and value diversity, is to integrate rather than segregate, is to creatively respond to change. So they're all dynamically relating to each other. If the yield, and that's where using the principles as a lens of looking at an issue or a problem or a situation, and how could the yield be encouraged or supported, then what of the permaculture principles, for example, could we embrace, or which ones may need more energy given to them to help balance the system, is my simple answer to that.
Okay, and I have one more thing to throw in that you reminded me of, Erin, because the question, I think, is partly, you know, why would there be more yields in this system? So we're talking about creating a more transparent, more integrated, more communicative, more robust, resilient system. So why would humans be more productive in that context? And it's because those are the types of things that research has indicated humans respond to positively. Some ownership of one's work, the ability to have some decision-making power in one's area of skill and expertise is really important. For anyone who hasn't seen it already, look up Dan Pink, and he's done some talks and an RSA Animate YouTube on this idea of like what really motivates people. And the three primary things that his research of the research has shown is autonomy, mastery, and can somebody remind me the third one? I'm forgetting it right now. Autonomy, mastery, and I believe it's capacity. It's like the ability to improve oneself. You know, capacity building opportunities, something like that. I can't think of the exact word. But a sociocratic organization creates more of that, so people are more committed to it and thus more productive. That's that. Thanks.
Do you have
purpose? Autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Thank Lorraine. Do you have a slide, or how do you want to talk about next events? Anyway, what do you have on next events or things coming up you want people to know about? John.
Okay, I'll just say, so sociocracyconsulting.com. I don't know if we can throw up that last slide that has Erin's email and my email. Sociocracyconsulting.com is the consulting group that I'm part of, which Jerry is also part of, as well as being a founder of SOFA, co-founder of SOFA. We have a website at sociocracyconsulting.com, and we have an events calendar that lists everything coming up. And right now, there's various events in different places in person, but one of the main things we do is offer online trainings. And I saw a few names on the chat of people I recognize from some of our trainings, so great to have you here. We have interactive online courses, and we'll be scheduling the next ones to be starting in the fall, and they'll appear on our calendar. I can't tell you when they are now because they're not scheduled yet, but they'll be coming up in the fall. And as usual, at the bottom of our website, we have links where you can follow us on Twitter or on Facebook or on LinkedIn. And we have an email list, and all of our events and classes and courses get announced there. So that's the best way, is choose your favorite way to follow Sociocracy Consulting Group, and that will keep you informed. Erin.
Yeah, thanks, John. So that would be November that we're looking to have the Foundations Online training for anyone who doesn't relate to fall as the time marker.
Thank you.
Here in the Southern Hemisphere, in Australia, particularly Australia, Pacific, Asia area, Gina Price and I are working together. We have an outfit called Southern Light Sociocracy, and we're available for introduction sessions, foundation training, consulting, all the things that people may need or wish to sink their teeth into regarding sociocracy. And both Gina and I are based in permaculture in our approach. So that's a prompt for this local region as well.
Okay, yeah, and in terms of, I'll just say in terms of Western United States, I have a number, probably will be 2 to possibly 4 foundations intensive trainings. They're not scheduled yet. Everyone is kind of juggling their calendars and trying to figure it out. But August, September, maybe into October, there will hopefully be one in southwestern Idaho, at a permaculture farm in CSA there. There will be one a little later in November-ish, perhaps October, November, in Powell River, British Columbia. And there will be hopefully one at the Heartwood Institute in Northern California, sometime in August or September. And I believe I will be, actually not Western United States, I'm maybe doing a training for a nonprofit in Wichita, Kansas, that may also be partly open to the public, and they're aiming for August or early September. So those will all get put on a Sociocracy Consulting website calendar.
And there'll be a foundations training in Western Australia and Denmark in the end of July for anyone who's over that way, and hopefully one in far north Queensland early next year. So we're looking for a 6-month time frame for that one.
I'll add the SOFA classes. We have our dates for the rest of the year up, but we're traveling in summer, so our next class starts September 1st. I'm putting the link in the chat. What is particular about our program is that we decided to run immersion classes. So we do classes where we put people into circles, and people those circles have to make decisions in how they do work, and they actually do some work together. And that's how we train people. And one of the trainers is always present. I already mentioned at the beginning, if you just want to run your own thing, you can do that using our video curriculum that I'm going to put in the chat as well. We also have a little theme going with this whole permaculture sociocracy thing. So there are more events out of that series coming up, but those are, again, not scheduled, so you will receive information about that. Right. So we're coming towards our formal end, and we have this little tradition in SOFA webinars. Unfortunately, in the webinar edition, we can't show the viewers, so we'll have to do the ritual ourselves, Erin and John. So what we do is we at least wave and say bye-bye, and we have to be unmuted for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much, John and Erin. This was completely fascinating, and I'm actually going to watch the recording myself to like go over it again with less adrenaline in my system. So thanks a lot, and I hope we will rework all of that material in all, like from all kinds of angles, and learn some more. So bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, all the viewers.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much for your engagement.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry, Jennifer, can you remind me of what we're doing now to come into the whole view?
Yes, so now what we're doing
now we just hang out?
Yes, what we're doing is we're just hanging out. Typically, a lot of people now sign off, which is totally fine. I want to give people the space to sign off. If you're still hanging out, and I see 22 people are still online, here's what you can do. Here's the special treat. You can, if you find it, you can raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I'm going, before you do it, let me tell you what happens when you raise your hand. What happens is that I can promote you into the panelist room, and then we're going to be like in a normal room, everybody together. And since we only have 20-something people now, we could even do that with everybody. We can host up to 50 people here, so it sort of works. So viewers, if you want to raise your hand, where is that again? If somebody, I can't access, there we go. Somebody's raising their hand. Mukunda, could you let other people know how that works in the chat? How do you raise your hand? Oh no, people are figuring it out now. Oh, Graham is coming. And oh, the panelists.
It's at the top of the screen.
Tony. Amy. Green.
Okay. Here we go.
So,
Hey everyone, great to see you all.
this is informal time, so you can speak, but let's, if you're choosing not to speak, mute yourself, because otherwise this gets very, very loud very quickly.
Are there any questions from the Q&A or anything that came up in the chat that we might not have caught that you really want to have answered at this stage?
Yeah, Mukunda, ignored your question. Go, Mukunda.
Thank you. Well, first of all, fantastic presentation, Erin and John. Thank you very much. That was awesome. John, it was nice to see you again. The question that I had, that I have actually is, what approaches are you familiar with that can help us to transition from this culture of rugged individualist to one of more cooperative culture?
Mukunda, I don't know if you saw my response to I wanted to quickly speak to that, and this is one piece of the puzzle, I think, because I think the answer to this isn't a cookie cutter approach. Mm-hmm. Something I work with is sharing circles or council as a feedback loop within a group of people, to really ensure that there's an understanding of what is happening. So sharing circles as I practice it, and I know that John is also heavily involved, or understands the concept of council, is a process where each person has the agency to speak for themselves, to be witnessed in what they have to share. And it's in that sort of sharing that a child would give, where they're not censoring emotionally necessarily what they offer to the group. So to me, this would be really powerful for a pioneer, even not a pioneer individual, but a pioneer culture within a group, to really understand that what each member is experiencing and feeling about a particular issue or in general. What pioneers and what the pioneering culture has to it is that hardiness, and it's really important in the pioneering culture and individuals that there is that hardiness and that thorniness. They need that. That's how the hard ground gets cracked through. It has a real purpose and function. But what is required to bring in more understanding and collaboration is, oh, I understand also what you have to give now. And not everyone in the group ecology is tough and thorny and extroverted. Some people are really, observers, and they sit back and they watch, and they won't share until they are given the space to share, and then they'll really share. They'll really put it out there. So to me, sharing circles or council, The Way of Council, is a book that you can read about this, as put out by the Ojai Foundation in California that John has worked with. It's really a social technology, as I see it, to help give a really critical feedback loop to the diversity of the ecology of the group.
Thank you, Erin. That's wonderful.
Definitely council. I mean, there are so many tools, there are so many specific methodologies. I'm actually going to throw in a couple of my favorites that might seem almost out of the box, but they're absolutely not. Any type of improvisational theater, group work, and so comedy improv, unscripted improv theater work, and something called playback theater. And there's various forms of that, but it's another spontaneous theater based on stories people tell that are spontaneously enacted by the players. And the reason I'm suggesting these is because I've been amazed at how much they offer in terms of building a collaborative culture. You cannot, the best improv, the best comedy improv comes from the whole. It's back to the slide about the whole, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And everybody who does improv knows this. When you are competing with each other to have the funniest line or do the funniest thing on stage, it does not work. Or at least it does not work as well when everybody is feeding each other in improv, and then it just kills, you know, it just kills. So and so the more there's a group mind, the better that form becomes, both for the players and for the audience. And playback theater is just a kind of a different take on that, where you are trying your best to, you know, 3 or 4 players are trying their best to become one mind to represent a story that's been presented to the group. So it's kind of a, and I'm suggesting them partly because they're much more embodied and much less heady than some of the things we do. So I'll generalize that to say anything that gets us more into our bodies and out of our sort of intellectual minds, I think can be helpful.
Which is really an integration rather than a segregation of how people work and the diversity of how people work. You know, some people are far more kinesthetic. They're going to be able to express themselves or understand far more when they're active and moving, or when they're speaking something. Some people really want to hear and see, like some people really need to see the people in the theatre to understand, oh, I get it now. So it's really integrating the diversity of the people by having a diversity of expression that supports that real understanding and coherence within the system, which I think is what helps us to move on from the pioneer reality, which John said, you know, pioneer species kind of grow apart. We need to really bring people together to support each other in that way.
And if you think about how succession works, it's a filling in of those empty spaces between the pioneer species, right? It's not, they don't have to be cut down or anything like that. We just have to fill in, you know, the soil that they're preparing gets filled in, and then that starts to become more luxuriant and more widespread. So there's a metaphor.
Well, that was rich. That was super rich. Thank you.
Good question, as always, Mukund.
By the way, I have a quick question. I'm realizing this was still good content, and I'm sort of unintentionally still recording. I can edit this out. Do the people who are here now shown with their pictures consent to being in the recording? Otherwise, I can just stop at the official end. Can I do a quick consent round, Tony? Okay. Henny, I assume so too. I didn't see you. Yes. You didn't hear? What? Are you consenting for me to keep this part of the recording because this was still rich content? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
But now it happens that you're in. Okay. Oh, and somebody wants in. I'm sorry, I was not paying attention. Now we're adding somebody who now I hope heard this and is now also consenting to be in the recording. Yes? Can I see quick consent from you? We do consent like this when we're muted. Yes? Okay, excellent. Okay, and since we're so many, I'm sort of still facilitating, I guess, because it simply works even less in online calls to just be talking. So Henny has something.
John, thank you very much, because you really, you know, was like an enlightenment to me at this point, because we try to compare the pioneers with the leaders, and you know, I'm living in a society right now that leaders are completely ignored, you know, they are even hated. But to fill in you know, like you said, to fill in with other people's expertises and, you know, whatever contribution that they can give in between the pioneers, it's what makes the whole system richer. So it's not that they need to be ignored or, you know, hated or whatever. It's just to bring in more people to put them together. And that, you know, wow, it really was an aha moment to me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I can give a specific example.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I won't name the organization, but I worked with a group of 4 founders who were clear from the start. They didn't want to run this thing. They wanted it to be self-organizing as much as possible, but they started out as 4 founders meeting. And their challenge was to transition from, so they started the organization, people liked the Sociocratic piece, they had some main circles that were doing the work of the organization, but then what happened is they would still meet as the 4 founders and make decisions that were in the domain of some circle, not at the founder level. And so, you know, but this was an organization of people who are very, with a lot of emotional intelligence, very embodied people because of what they do. And so they got immediate pushback, you know, like, wait, you said this is the job of our circle. How are you guys making this decision? And they realized, okay, no, wait, we don't want that. So they were wrestling with the question of how to be a founder within a sociocratic organization, as opposed to being a founder where the founders make the decision and then propagate that to the people doing stuff. And I think they're getting it. And the very short version of my suggestion was, you still have the founder ideas, you still have the founder energy, you just bring it into the circles that you are in. And the fact is that each of them was initially an operational leader in one of those main circles because that made sense to everyone and that was consented. It's like you don't have a founder circle that pushes things into other circles. You as founders take your founderness to where you already are in the organization and you bring it there. So that seemed to be helpful for them, if it's helpful for anyone else.
It is for me, if I can add, because I'm in that position right now of having found a sofa, and now we have volunteer circles not taking over. That's not what I want to say. That sounds too much like power is being taken away from me, but boy, people stepping up. And it's hard to be in that
yeah, there you go.
having to let go. And it's not, you know, it's not even that we're like lying on the ground. We're still quite there. But I love what you said, John, just now, of like feeding the founder energy into the circus where I am, but not having, you know, not being everywhere, because we have to give provide some space for people to, like, some, you know, there has to be some nutrients, some light, some water for the others. And that also is some intentional stepping back in this case.
I think that this is a really critical part of the whole process of embodying sociocracy, just in the same way that permaculture is a paradigm shift. And when people learn about permaculture for the first time, there's really quite often a light bulb moment, and they almost can become evangelist about it. You know, everyone needs to know about this. Well, in the same way, I experienced that sort of paradigm shift happening with sociocracy, like, whoa, all of a sudden, you know, I have the agency to give my perspective and be heard in that, but not necessarily feel the responsibility like, well, if I say something, I'm going to have to do everything, and so I might not say it. Or, you know, the founders know that they will be moderated as well, because I've worked a lot with pioneers and founders, and quite often how I turn up with them is I'm a support species, and I'm often saying to them, I see your vision, I hear that, it's so important, I want that as well. But we also, for that vision to actualize, you need to spread the load, because you're not able to carry it all. It's now too much energy for you to carry, and you're floundering, and people are getting disappointed or they're frustrated or whatever. So that when I was saying in the webinar, Sociocracy offers a framework that the founders know that their vision and what the work that they've done is being distributed in an appropriate way and being held appropriately. People know that, and they feel the eldership of that, I guess, is kind of the energy that comes through with that, it's the wisdom of the vision is being held in amongst all of the action. And then the volunteers, as you were saying, Jennifer, they get to use their agency to bounce off that level and take it even deeper and go into more of the details. And I really see the founders as they're setting up the patterns, the key elemental foundational patterns of what is happening in an organization. And then all of the other people that come in, they bring all the details that are really critical that maybe a pioneer or a founder isn't quite driving into so specifically, or maybe they just don't have the capacity or the scope to do it all. John, do you have anything more to say?
No, I think that's good.
Let's do a roundabout. Is there a new question? Otherwise, I would shift into a round, and you can sort of add, you can add pieces to this topic, sort of the founder succession thing, but don't take it too far away. Otherwise, it's going to be hard because everybody in the round is going to respond to the same prompt. So if you take it far away, it's going to be hard for the people after you. So just keeping that in mind. Let's start from Laureen and then Tony. And you're all muted, so you have, thank you.
I have nothing, I mean, I love this, but I have nothing to add. I love everything that's being said.
Oh, and I love when people have the guts to say that they have nothing to add. I'm a big fan of that. Tony and then Siri.
You're always going to be disappointed with me. I always have something to add.
Siri and then Beth.
Wait, I didn't finish.
Oh, what? Okay.
I actually have something to add.
Oh, you said, wow, now I see.
Okay.
Okay.
So one of the interesting things to me is that people coming into sociocracy or permaculture are coming in from a position of the current culture. So their reactions are going to be sculpted from their experience. So there's one of the things that I talked to you about yesterday or the day before is about the need for something like nonviolent communication, to have some sort of system to help promote effective behavior inside of these structures.
Siri and then Beth.
Yeah, you have talked a lot of things that was really important for us. For example, founders that are not in a founder's circle. We never created one, or rather they did not. Instead, they are in not even the general circle, they were in the sub-circle. And we, during the first year of this organization, there are gaps in our organizations. So people try to fill those gaps with ideas they bring with them. And it's not always permaculture or sociocracy ideas. It can come from other types of organizations. So that has created problems. And for that reason, I also listened carefully when you talked about trust and culture in the organization. So I think this has been very rich, a very rich webinar, and it gave me a lot. Thank you. And I'm not Siri. My computer died, and my friend.
Okay, I was
gone.
I figured, but what else can I do? Okay, Beth, and then hold on. What I had Graham. Yes, Beth, and then Graham.
I'm pretty new to sociocracy, and so I'm approaching this and trying to understand all the bits and pieces of this, and I love all the concepts, and they were very well presented. So thank you for your part in this. I'm joining a group that's established, and they suggested this would be a good mode to learn some things. I also belong to other groups that have nothing at all to do with sociocracy, and they're older individuals who have been doing their thing for years. It almost seems to me when we go to meetings that it's like this deaf yelling at each other. They're just, I can get people to join this organization, but I can't keep them there because there's this whole energy of this top-down control and Robert's Rules of Order. So my thought is like, how could I possibly help them shift into something that would be much more dynamic like this?
Well, I mean, yeah. Should we respond, Jennifer, or are we just?
Yes, but brief, please.
Yeah. Well, briefly, I would, if it was me, I would start by addressing the pain in the room. Like, who's enjoying these meetings? Is this effective? Are we getting things done? Because sometimes people are so happy with whatever system they've got that they'd rather just keep it going. And then for me, I know I'm in the wrong organization there. So what I'm saying is, maybe even individually at first, ask people, you know, are you good with how we're having our meetings? Does this work for you? Are you happy with this? Or would you like to see something different? And then see what is the group, you know, like what's the first thing that most people would agree they'd like to change about how the meetings go down, how they're done. And then see if, and then, you know, are people willing to try and experiment? Just one little bit at a time. That's my brief thought.
Thank you.
One of the standard responses, have you given feedback? That is the short version of what John just said. Yeah. Feedback. Graham and then Mukunda.
Hi there. We're looking at it from a point of view where we've got legal responsibilities that can't be devolved. So it's linked to a charity organisation and a business, that, you know, a limited company, and also a membership. So for being a charity, there are legal responsibilities. So I'm, you know, on the board of trustees. So as a director, I have a legal responsibility on that. So when we talk about devolving decision-making down, it's how to make sure that there is a backstop, that nobody can do anything that would damage the organization, which, you know, a handful of us have a legal responsibility for. Any thoughts?
Well, very briefly, it's similar to nonprofits in the United States, where the board holds formal responsibility for certain aspects of the, you know, financial integrity and legal integrity. And so, I mean, you kind of said it, I think, is that you want to delegate, and you just need to make sure, you may need to add something to the system so that, you know, there's board oversight on things that absolutely need board oversight, and try to make that as lean as possible, you know, as low overhead as possible, so that, you know, what has to be dealt with that way doesn't just add a layer of bureaucracy or burden. I mean, that's just a general response, but I'm familiar with the situation you're describing. Yeah, Erin.
And what I would include is that, for example, you might have a Facebook page or a newsletter or something like that. And that might be run by a communication circle or the admin circle. You know, that's the sort of thing that doesn't necessarily need to go back to those legal implications. It's something that that circle can take care of in their own right. And they don't need to check in with other people about the legalities around what they're saying. You don't need to be involved in their decision making. So that's devolving that decision making to people who can just think about that. You don't need to worry about that. You know, it's being taken care of.
It's sometimes down to the situation where using the social media, as you just said there, Erin, if they said something or did something that committed the organization. So yes, we could have procedures in, or policies and things in place that said, you know, what they could and can't do. But it's just that sort of risk that we're struggling with at the moment, how to construct a business company organization, a charity organization, and a whole range of unofficial side subgroups that are, run by members and volunteered, non-paid people. The paid people, the normal constraints could apply there, but then it's treading carefully. We're looking at this, how we can actually do it, but if we do it, I think it will work very well, but it's changing from the old hierarchy to something new. That's the difficulty to it. And attracting people onto the board who are willing to take that sort of risk as well. A lot of people, senior managers who you would invite onto a board of trustees, would come in because they know the ropes of the traditional organization, but we've got to be careful we don't frighten them off, thinking that they are accepting responsibilities legally for things that they don't necessarily have full control over. So it sometimes feels like we're in a catch-22.
I'll just say you are a bit, there's a similar situation with the Ojai Foundation that I'm working with and their board. Most of the board is open to trialing something more implemented, but they've got one person in particular who comes from that external professional world and it's very nervous, so it's, you are on the cutting edge with what you're doing. It's about the best I can do it.
Well, on that, I've made a career of that over a long time in consultancy. And we actually used to, in manufacturing, we put in self-directing or self-managing teams, which it stripped out all the management layers. You'd have a factory of 600 people with 2 managers and then a board of directors. Everybody else was in self-managing teams. So I know it can work, and that was over 20 years ago we're doing that. But in the more staid places like charities, it gets a bit different. Thank you.
I will finish the round with Mukunda and then Henny. Henny, I did see your hand, but I know you can also wait. Mukunda.
Yes, thank you. I'll be quick. I don't have any questions, or the only feedback I'd like to give is that there was much more richness in this webinar than I am able to absorb. And I'm very grateful because I'm in the permaculture circle of SALT 4 right now, and our aim is to create more connection between the permaculture movement and sociocracy. And we have committed to write a paper on the connections already existing, and you've given us so much to work with. So thank you a bunch. I also want to thank Laureen, who's the secretary of the Permaculture Circle, who has created a document to catch a lot of the information that you guys have shared with us this evening, and she diligently typed a lot of it. So thank you, Laureen. And yes, with this, thank you very much. I'm complete. Check.
Henny.
Yeah, when Graham was talking about the charity thing, it just came to my mind the bee hive. And even if there is a big queen in there, it doesn't mean that she will survive with the other rows of the other bees. So I think it's all complementary. And by consenting on the row description of each of the parts that makes the whole, being the whole charity, it's what makes sense. So perhaps by like consenting with the row description or changing the description of each row will make things more in equivalent level, I think, like, and also deciding on the responsibility of each of them. And the other comment that I wanted to make is that when bringing the zoning, the permaculture zoning back to the to our conversation, it came to my mind the difference between the policy and the operational decision-making processes. And, you know, like the policy, it takes a long term. So maybe it's like in zone 5 that you're gonna review in different, you know, time frame. And the operational circles are, you know, they are daily, in a day-to-day making decisions. So maybe that's like zone 1, or, you know, depending on the decision, zone 2. So that brought me an understanding also on how it can be addressed. And yeah, I'm also part of the Permaculture Circle, and it's you guys will be receiving a questionnaire from us soon. So hope you can contribute to our survey. We are taking the SADIM process to work as a circle to then be able to write the papers. So we are doing the whole SADIM model to get there. So you're gonna be hearing from us soon. Thank you very much.
Lorraine, you passed. Is there anything you want to say now? No?
I mean, is this a closing round, or what is this that we're doing?
This is your last statement before I go into the closing round.
Then okay, I'll wait for the closing round. Thank you.
So, closing round. Anything you still want to say, or you can pass? I'm gonna, I guess I'm gonna start with Lorraine. I'm just gonna do the same order. Maybe people even remember where they were. So, Lorraine and then Tony.
I won't pass. I wanted to just say thank you. This was, I mean, I'm echoing Mukunda, but this was so much richer than I ever knew possible, and so much food for thought. So just mind-blowing, and I loved I'm really into living systems and the paradigm of it, and the parallels that you drew and the things that you brought. And I'm practicing permaculture in my backyard, and I just love, my mind is blown. So just thank you.
Tony, and then the person who's come. No, Oscar. There, you renamed yourself. Thank you, Tony. You're muted, Tony.
This was great. I really loved the presentations, and just the bearing and personality and warmth and openness, and just how well you both talked and presented the information and organized it. It was wonderful. I'm really grateful to have been part of this. Thank you.
Oscar and then Beth.
Yeah, one thing that also was interesting was when someone asked about the need to create a yield. Maybe that's a discussion to deepen at another occasion. What's the relation between the vision and aim of an organization, and how important is it for the people in the organization to discuss creating the yield? There's a direct relation there, but I think it was really, well, it gave me a lot. Thank you.
Beth and then Graham.
Thank you very much. The presentation was wonderful, and I have copious notes, and I'll go back and look at the YouTube again to just see if I understood everything. So, but thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Graham and Mukunda.
Yes, I thank you for the webinar this evening. It's now nearly 2 o'clock in the morning where I am. It's been quite enlightening. I've had a little bit of a background in sociocracy, but mostly in the permaculture side of things. So I can see a good fit there. If possible, I'd like to keep in contact. I've already put out a couple of people's LinkedIn on the social media. I'd like to expand our network and keep in touch that way. So if there's anybody who wants to keep in contact, please find me on LinkedIn or Facebook or one of the other many media places. But I've enjoyed this evening. Thank you.
Mukunda and Henny.
Yes, nothing to add. Thank you again. And we'll see you around, I guarantee it.
Henny and then John and Aaron.
I'd like to share that my mom was quite surprised when she stepped in and saw Erin on the screen of my computer and said, "What are you doing down there?" And she thought we were very similar, so I just felt like saying it. She made a confusion between the two of us, so that's my mom saying. Thank you guys, that was a lovely evening to be here. And yeah, I'm gonna take the credits for that huge question because I'm about to give a PDC. I'm gonna be one of the facilitators, and that was coming to my mind a lot, and I'm gonna use this example that you guys gave. So thank you very much. And thank you, Jerry and Jennifer, for putting this up together. That was a brilliant and very nice idea. Cheers.
John and then Erin.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, Jerry and Jennifer, for making this happen and having the idea and sticking with the time frame that it ended up taking to actually get the webinar to happen. Maybe a little longer than you thought, but that was worth it. And thank you, Erin. It's been a great pleasure to collaborate with Erin some more here. We've been kind of having collegial conversations, but they ramble, and this was our first opportunity to really focus on something, so that was great. And thank you all for everybody who showed up, who isn't here to hear me thank them, and everybody who stuck around. I really enjoy these kind of after conversations as well. And in particular, I want to say I appreciate everybody's feedback on how rich this has been for you, if it has. I think because these subjects are so much in my mind and my experience, I was, I'm like in a place of going, well, God, I hope this is worthwhile for people. It might be a bit thin and rudimentary, but we'll see where it goes. So it sounds like it was more than that from other perspectives. So thank you for that perspective. And yeah, well done and well moderated and hosted, and thank you.
Erin.
Okay, so I'm feeling a huge amount of gratitude for being a part of this experience. I really thank you, Jerry and Jennifer, for inviting me to be a part of it. John, I really thank you for being such an engaging co-presenter. We both had a really good time putting this together. And I think it speaks to the richness that came through. The biggest thing I get is that these are two languages that I love to speak, sociocracy and permaculture. They're two very related languages, but not necessarily spoken at the same time. So this is a real crossroads that is very rich to me. And I think it's because it speaks to the whole systems that is embodied in all of life that we inherently know as humans and as beings in life. And it makes those concepts so clear and accessible to us that we can then move and play with them. So I get really energized and engaged, and I'm so grateful to hear of the enrichment that has come through in the webinar, and I will totally be watching this again. And I really love connecting with people. I'm really glad to connect with all of you here and all of those who have been a part of the call, and I'm so looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes now. And I totally think this is going to continue on, and I'm really excited to be a part of the conversation. So thanks so much for having me, and I'll see you next time.
Great. I enjoyed the flow between the two of you, John and Erin. That was very alive and yeah, really sweet to watch how you complemented each other. And I myself enjoy matchmaking, and a lot of that happened today. So I'm happy. I'm just happy watching how all this evolves and things come together, and things that you thought were just little pieces of a Rubik's Cube, all of a sudden you get a sense of like, oh, maybe this is going to fit somewhere, and something much bigger is going to come out of that. So that was great. Now that you're back, do you want to say something? You get the last word, Jerry.
I'm just happy this happened, and we really are. I think it's already been said by a number of people. The weaving of the two languages, of these two systems, designs, thinking. That's my vision of the world. Is we're just going to keep weaving some of these big picture frames. And we're all going to come together. So I'm glad that we're contributing here doing that.
Great. Before I end the meeting, I already saved the chat to be sure, but if you want to do something with the chat right away, and not wait until I make it available. Why don't you save it yourself? I know most of you know how to do it. Next to the point where you type, where you would type for the chat, there's the more thing. Click down, save chat. Find it on your computer. I think then you can say like find it, show in Finder or something like that. I'm going to close this meeting. Goodbye, everybody. Good night for those of you who have it